That morning in Montana showed no hint that everything was about to collapse like an avalanche. The sky was clear, the pale sunlight almost taunting, and Clara Bennett still believed she was in for an ordinary day at Bozeman Elementary, where she had worked for over 3 years. But by mid-morning, a knock sounded at the teacher's lounge door, and the principal walked in, her face unable to hide the discomfort. "Clara, I'm so sorry," she began. "The district's budget has been suddenly cut. We have to terminate contracts with some teachers, and you're on that list." The words terminate contract landed like a block of ice. Clara heard the rush of blood in her ears, her heart pounding so hard she wasn't sure she was breathing normally. Part of her wanted to protest, to ask, "Why me?" But one look at the principal's tired eyes gave her the answer. It wasn't about ability, but about so-called budget priorities, something dedication and love for the job could never outweigh. She packed up her small classroom, a few picture books, handmade cards from students, and the tiny stuffed bear little Mark had given her to watch over the class when you're busy. 10 minutes was all it took to fit 3 years of her life into a tote bag. But the sense of loss weighed heavy, like frost sinking into her skin. Leaving the school, Clara decided to head back to her rented room for a rest. But as she climbed the wooden steps of the old 3-story building, she found her landlord, Mr. Harris, standing with a man in a suit and glasses holding a stack of documents. "Clara," Mr. Harris said awkwardly, "I just sold the building. The new owner wants to renovate, so everyone needs to move out within 48 hours. Clara let out a short, bitter laugh. "Are you serious? You know, this is business. I don't have a choice." In less than an hour, she had lost both her job and her home. 2 blows in quick succession left her reeling. Hugging her tote bag, she stepped out onto the street, the cold wind lashing her face like it wanted to tear her skin. The sky that had been blue moments ago now turned a heavy gray. In Montana, winter could change without warning. One shift of the wind, and storm clouds from the Bridger Range would sweep down, swallowing the town. The first snowflakes fell as Clara wrestled her suitcase out of the boarding house. They were light as powder, but within 10 minutes they thickened enough to blur her vision. The siren of a patrol car wailed from the corner, warning residents to seek shelter. Clara dragged her suitcase along the main street, planning to head to a friend's nearby, but the wind pushed the suitcase backward, and snow piled in layers on her hair and coat. Just as she turned into the alley leading to the park, a small figure darted across her vision. It was a boy on a mini snowboard who lost his balance and tumbled to the curb. Clara rushed over. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The boy, about 6, grimaced, clutching his knee. Bright red blood seeped onto the white snow. He didn't cry, just bit his lip, his eyes wide with panic. Clara quickly unwound the wool scarf from her neck, folded it into a strip, and pressed it gently to the wound. "Hold it like this, and I'll find a way to get you somewhere warm." She guided him toward the windbreak wall of a closed cafe, shielding him from the whipping gusts. At that moment, a dark green pickup truck screeched to a halt by the curb. The door swung open and a tall man stepped out. He wore a thick leather jacket, snow-dusted jeans, and a beanie pulled low. His ice-blue eyes swept the scene, locking on the boy. "Sam." His voice was a mix of alarm and sternness. Kneeling beside the boy, he gently checked the injury. Clara looked up, slightly taken aback by his intense demeanor. He fell while snowboarding. "I used my scarf for first aid." His gaze shifted to her, assessing, neither hostile nor trusting, but as if weighing whether she could be relied on. "I'm James Whitmore," he said curtly, the boy's father. "Thank you." He eased the scarf aside to check the wound, nodding when he saw the bleeding had stopped. "In this weather, we can't stay out here." James lifted Sam into his arms, then glanced at Clara. "Where are you headed?" Clara hesitated. "I don't have a place right now. I was going to a friend's house," but she looked toward the white-out street. "I don't think I'll make it." James glanced at the swirling snow where the town was vanishing into the storm. He sighed. "The road back to town is closing. The police will block it at the next turn. Staying here is dangerous." She frowned. "So, I should come with me to the ranch. At least there's a fireplace and warm blankets. When the storm passes, I'll get you back to town." His tone was firm, not pitying, just a practical decision. Clara hesitated. Going with a stranger in a blizzard wasn't ideal, but staying out here was certain trouble. Sam's eyes, no longer as frightened, looked at her as if waiting for her to agree. "All right," she nodded. James opened the truck's back door, settling Sam into the seat, then returned to help load Clara's suitcase and bag into the truck bed. The wind slammed the door back so hard she nearly struggled to close it. On the road, James focused on driving, hands tight on the wheel as the truck crawled around icy bends. Clara sat in the passenger seat, watching through the fogged window as the snow swallowed everything, the headlights carving only two narrow beams through the white. She didn't know where she'd be tomorrow, or what her next job would be. But for now, at least, she and the boy she had just met were out of the storm. And though she didn't want to admit it, James's calm in the middle of danger gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. When the wooden sign for Whitmore Ranch emerged, faint in the swirling snow, Clara knew her journey had just taken a turn she never could have imagined. James's pickup truck climbed steadily up the snow-covered road. The night sky was a hazy gray, with only the twin beams of the headlights slicing through the thick, swirling flakes. On either side, tall old pines bent under the wind, their branches heavy with snow that occasionally dropped in clumps when the gust hit hard. Clara sat in the passenger seat, clutching the single tote bag that held everything she had left. The cold still seeped through the seams of her coat, but it was nothing compared to the chill inside her, a hollow feeling of displacement. No job, no home, and now riding in a stranger's truck toward a place she'd never even heard of. "Are we almost there?" Sam's small but clear voice rose from the back seat. "Almost, son," James replied, his eyes fixed on the whitewash road ahead. Minutes later, a wooden sign emerged faintly through the snow. Whitmore Ranch, with a stylized lavender sprig carved beneath the name. Clara blinked in mild surprise. Not a cow or a horse like most ranch logos she'd seen, but lavender. The truck turned down a drive leading to the main house. Through the window, Clara caught sight of a large two-story log home with steep pitched roofs blanketed in white. Warm golden light spilled from square-pane windows, and smoke curled thick from the chimney, vanishing into the dim sky. James pulled up close to the porch and got out first. He opened the passenger door for Clara, holding it firmly against the wind. "Get inside quick. It's strong out here." She stepped down, her boots sinking ankle-deep into the powder, as if the world was swallowing her into its silent whiteness. But the moment the thick wooden door shut behind her, the house's warmth wrapped around her, turning the sting in her cheeks into heat. The living room was wide and open, honeyed oak floors gleaming softly under the warm glow of the lamps. A stone fireplace crackled with bright red flames, the faint scent of pine resin threading the air. But what caught Clara's attention most wasn't the fire. It was the lavender. The fragrance lingered everywhere, not overpowering, but distinct, as if embracing the entire house. On the coffee table sat a small glass jar filled with dried lavender sprigs, their pale purple tips slightly frayed with age. On the bookshelf between hard covers were little fabric sachets tied with purple ribbons. Even the white curtains had embroidered lavender along the hems. Clara drew in a deep breath, and the sweet, faintly dry warmth of the scent seemed to weave itself into her lungs. Footsteps creaked on the wooden staircase. A boy of about 9 appeared, light brown hair, tousled, blue eyes the same as Sam's, but deeper, carrying a maturity beyond his years. "Papa," he called. "Where's Sam?" "Here," Sam answered, running to hug his older brother. James rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tommy, this is Miss Clara. She helped Sam when he fell out there." Tommy gave a polite nod. "Hello, ma'am." His voice was soft, but there was a guarded note in it. "Hello, Tommy." Clara smiled warmly. "Your little brother just has a small scrape. You take good care of him. Tommy, help Miss Clara get a blanket and pillow. James said she'll sleep on the sofa tonight." "Yes, Papa." Tommy led Clara down the hallway. The wall lamps lit up framed family photos, mostly of the two boys at different ages, with a few showing James beside a long-haired brunette with a bright smile. Clara didn't stop, but she could feel the weight of the story in them. Near the storage room, Tommy reached for a wooden door, but instead of blankets, he accidentally opened a small room. Instantly, a stronger wave of lavender spilled into the air. The room was bright despite the storm outside, thanks to a large window. In the center stood a wooden sewing table holding a half-finished light blue men's shirt, one sleeve still unstitched, the thread still looped through the needle. Beside it, a fabric basket brimmed with spools of thread, pins, scissors, and neatly folded scraps of cloth. Tommy froze, then spoke in a low voice, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. "Papa's kept it just like this since Mom died." His tone didn't waver, but his eyes shimmered, both sad and proud. Clara felt a tight ache rise in her chest. The room was like a moment preserved in amber, still holding the warmth of someone long gone. Even the lavender seemed stronger here, as if it had lingered from the days the woman sat there sewing. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly, and gently closed the door. They continued in silence, the only sound the creak of the wooden floor under their steps. When they returned to the living room, James had set a steaming mug of tea on the coffee table. "Sit and warm up. I'll grab more blankets." Clara accepted the cup, the heat seeping into her chilled fingers. "Thank you for letting me stay." "It's nothing," James replied in his deep, brief way. "In weather like this, I don't leave anyone out there." Sam was already curled up on the sofa, his knee bandaged, eyes drooping with fatigue. Tommy sat beside him, holding a book he wasn't reading, glancing at Clara now and then as if trying to figure her out. Clara guessed they weren't used to strangers in the house, especially one sleeping in the living room. After a simple dinner of hot soup and toasted bread, James sent the boys upstairs. Sam waved. "Good night, Miss Clara." Tommy just gave a small nod before disappearing with his brother. The living room settled into the sounds of the wind whipping at the porch and the pop and crackle of the fire. James laid a pillow and blanket on the sofa. "Get some rest. The storm will last till morning." Clara smiled her thanks, pulling the blanket over her lap. "I'll try to sleep, but with this wind, it might take a while to get used to." A faint smile has first touched James's lips. "You will. In Montana, the winter wind always wants to sing all night." When he went upstairs, Clara lay down, drawing the blanket over her shoulders. The lavender from a small sachet hanging near the fireplace drifted into every breath. She closed her eyes, but the image of the sewing room and the unfinished shirt lingered. Between the wind's howl and the flicker of the flames, she realized this was a house both warm and steeped in loss. And though she meant to stay only one night, something in her gut told her she had stepped into a story that would change everything. "Do you like this personality?" Clara woke to the blinding white light pouring through the living room window. Gone was the night's darkness, and the smell of cold wind outside now stretched an endless blanket of snow, as if the world had been tucked under a thick, boundless quilt. The fireplace still glowed faintly, the scent of lavender from the sash on the wall mingling with the gentle aroma of burned wood, warm yet unfamiliar. She sat up, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and walked to the window. Snow had swallowed the front yard, burying the wooden fence and nearly covering the Whitmore Ranch sign. In that moment, Clara realized she was truly in rural Montana, at least an hour's drive from the nearest town, and that was in good weather. Footsteps sounded behind her. James appeared, wearing a grey turtleneck sweater and jeans, a steaming ceramic mug in his hand. He set it down on the coffee table in front of her. "Coffee? Strong? Hot?" he said simply, like an order, but without pressure. "Thank you," Clara replied, taking the mug and inhaling its rich aroma. James sank into the armchair opposite her, leaning his elbows on his knees, his expression as steady as it had been the night before. "I want to talk to you about today, in the next few weeks." Clara set the mug down, waiting for him to continue. "The village school sent word this morning," James began. "Because of the blizzard and a staff shortage, they're closing for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. I don't want the boys sitting idle at home, and I can't be with them all day. My work won't allow it." Clara gave a small nod. "And you need someone to teach them at home?" "Exactly." His eyes met hers directly. "I know you're a teacher. Sam told me you read to him last night, and Tommy said you helped him find a blanket. Both of them seem to like you." She raised an eyebrow, surprised at the comment. "You figured that out in less than a day." James shrugged. "I know my kids. They don't warm up easily. If you hadn't been there yesterday, Sam might have been afraid of the snow for weeks. You have a teaching degree, and you're available. I think this could work." Clara rested her chin on her hand, thinking staying in this man's house for 2 weeks or more wasn't part of her plan. But the truth was, she didn't have another plan. No job, no apartment, roads to town closed, and not enough savings for a long hotel stay. "You're offering me a full-time tutoring job for the boys?" she asked. "Not just tutoring." James leaned forward. "I need someone to oversee their homeschooling, reading, math, science projects, and make sure they're not spending the day arguing or sneaking video games. I'll pay you, plus room and board. Clara was quiet for a few seconds, sipping the coffee. The heat down her throat seemed to sharpen her mind. Sounds like a generous offer, but it could also lead to misunderstandings. His gaze didn't waver. I'm not looking for anything except help for the kids. This is a job. Clear, transparent. If you agree, we'll set boundaries right away. Clara gave a faint smile, appreciating his directness. Boundaries? I like that. So, where would I stay? The guest room downstairs. It has a window facing the back garden. James answered immediately, as if he had already planned it. Work schedule? Lessons from 9 to noon. Afternoons flexible depending on the weather. I'll cover all supply costs. And evenings? Clara asked. In the evenings you're free, unless the boys need help with homework, or you want to join the family for dinner. She studied him, looking for any hint of hesitation, but found none. Everything about James seemed short, clear, and without unnecessary words. All right, Clara said, setting her mug down. I'll take it, but let me be clear. I'm accepting because the work fits my skills and my current situation. This is not an invitation for anything beyond that. The corner of James's mouth lifted almost a smile. I know and I respect that. A brief, comfortable silence settled, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Outside, the wind still hurled snowflakes against the glass. Where are the boys? Clara asked, breaking the quiet. Probably still upstairs. Sam's not an early riser, and Tommy usually spends mornings reading in his room. James stood, motioning toward the hallway. Want to see the guest room? Clara nodded, following him down the hall. They passed the wall of family photos, dark wooden frames, pictures of the boys at different ages, and a few with James and a long-haired brunette, her smile radiant. Clara felt a faint tug in her chest, but didn't ask. The guest room was tucked into the corner of the house, its large window now opening to a backyard blanketed in snow. Inside, it was neat, with a bed covered in beige sheets, a small desk and reading lamp in the corner, and a built-in closet with a few empty hangers. On the bedside table sat a small purple fabric sash lavender. Without a doubt. Everything's clean, James said. If you need personal items, I can have my assistant pick them up in town when the roads reopen. Clara set her bag on the bed and drew in the soft lavender scent. Thank you. I think I'll be fine here. Then it settled, James replied. I'll tell the boys at lunch. She glanced out the window at the steady snowfall. Even though it was just a job agreement, Clara couldn't deny the strange feeling in her chest, a mix of apprehension, curiosity, and a small measure of comfort she didn't want to admit. The first morning of home learning began with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the wind curling around the eaves. Clara woke early, pulled on a sweater and boots, and headed to the garage behind the house. The roll-up door clattered as it opened, letting in a rush of icy air. Inside, the space was just big enough for 2 pickup trucks, with one corner stacked high with toolboxes, paint cans, and coils of irrigation hose. She switched on a small heater, set up a folding table in the center, laid down a plastic tarp, and arranged 3 trays: snow science, plastic cups, a thermometer, salt, baking soda, vinegar, letter art, paper, colored pencils, markers, engineering, plastic bottles, straws, rubber bands, a mini motor she'd found in an old supply box. On the wall she taped up sheets labeled Today's Schedule and Little Wishes. In one corner, she strung up a cord with clothespins for displaying finished work. The cold garage began to take on a spark of life. James appeared in the doorway holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. You did all this morning? Clara smiled. Just making use of what's here. Kids learn best when they can touch everything. He nodded slightly, his gaze lingering on the engineering tray. That motor, I once used it to pump water in the greenhouse. Perfect, she said. We'll build a drip irrigation model. Sam was the first to burst in, beanie askew, scarf half undone. Tommy followed at a steady pace, his eyes scanning the papers on the wall. Welcome to the garage classroom, Clara said. Let's start with our little wishes. Sam scribbled immediately. I wish snow wasn't so cold so I could make snow angels. Tommy wrote, Hope the irrigation model works. Part 1, Snow Science. Clara scooped snow into 2 cups, sprinkling salt in one and baking soda in the other, placing thermometers in each to monitor changes. Sam's eyes lit up when the salted snow melted faster, and he eagerly wrote down the results. Tommy added an observation about salt's effect on plants. James leaned against a garage post, rare amusement softening his features as he listened to his son discuss science. Part 2. Letter art. Each boy wrote a postcard to their future self describing the blizzard day. Sam described snow like powdered sugar. Tommy wrote, "The wind isn't scary because there's a class in the garage." The words were short, but they warmed Clara's heart. Part 3. Engineering. They assembled the drip system from the plastic bottles. Sam cut a straw too short, sending water spraying everywhere, where both boys doubled over laughing. Clara wrote on the board, "Failure number 1 and the reason why." Tommy drilled the bottle cap off-center, making the water flow unevenly, but persisted until it was right. Then James stepped in, connecting the mini motor to the system, upgrading it to run on batteries. The three of them worked together until steady drops fell into a pot of time. When class ended, Clara handed out bread and apples. Sam munched while fiddling with the irrigation model. Tommy sat quietly by the door, still glancing at the dripping water as if afraid it might stop. That evening, while James was tied up in a call, Sam tugged Clara toward the fireplace. "Will you read to us again?" Tommy pretended not to care, but had already taken a seat beside his brother. Clara chose the snowy day, her voice warm and unhurried. Sam giggled at the part where the boy knocked snow off a tree, and Tommy leaned in slightly. When she finished, Clara suggested, "Tomorrow, let's make snow maps in the backyard using our footprints." Sam shouted his agreement, and Tommy added the idea of marking the trails with colored sticks. Just then, James stood in the doorway. He quietly took in the scene. Two boys by the fire, a woman reading to them the faint scent of lavender, and the irrigation model placed near the stove so the water wouldn't freeze. In that moment he realized it had been far too long since this house had known such peace, the kind born of learning, laughter, and curiosity, nurtured in exactly the right way. That morning, Clara went upstairs to find Sam for their reading lesson. His bedroom door was ajar. She knocked lightly, pushed it open, and was about to call his name when she stopped short. Sam was sitting cross-legged on the floor with his back to the door, his small hands busy rummaging through the drawer of his desk. One by one, he pulled out small purple fabric sachets, lining them up neatly in front of him. Clara stepped closer. "Sam, what are you doing?" He startled, quickly, sweeping his arms around the little pile, eyes wide with alarm. Nothing." She knelt beside him, softening her voice. "I'm not going to take anything from you. I just want to know what these are." Sam hesitated, then sighed, and let his hands drop. In front of her were 6 small lavender sachets, each tied with a purple ribbon, each releasing a faint, sweet scent. Some were frayed at the edges, the fabric faded with age. "My mum made these," Sam said quietly, his voice barely above the whisper of wind through a window. "I keep them here, so they still smell like her." Clara gently picked one up, feeling the tiny beads shifting inside. "They're beautiful. Why do you hide them?" He bit his lip. "One of the babysitters told me not to hold on to the past. She said keeping them wasn't good for me. She took one to throw away, so I hid all of them here." The words were small, but they pierced Clara's heart like a needle. She pictured a 6-year-old boy clutching his mother's tiny keepsakes, hiding them away as if it were something wrong. Her throat tightened. "Sam," she said, her tone gentle but firm, "keeping something that reminds you of someone you love isn't holding on to the past. It's a way of keeping that love with you, even when everything else changes." His blue eyes lifted toward her, hesitant as if weighing whether to believe her. "How about," Clara continued, "we make something to keep these safe so no one will think they're just clutter?" "What kind of something?" Sam asked. "A memory box," she smiled. "A place for all the things that remind you of your mum, and whenever you miss her, you can open it. You'll still live your life, still learn, still play. But when you open that box, you'll know her love never went away." Sam was quiet for a moment, then nodded quickly. "I want that." That afternoon, Clara found an old wooden box in the storage room and dusted it off. She lined it with soft fabric and gave Sam a stack of small slips of paper to write labels. He placed each lavender sachet inside, writing notes like, "Mom kept this under her pillow. Mom hung this in the winter closet." When they finished, Sam hugged the box to his chest like it was a kitten. He didn't say anything, just sat quietly beside Clara, his shoulder leaning slightly against hers. In that moment, she felt she was holding something fragile but real, the first threads of a child's trust. That evening, while Clara was tidying up books in the garage classroom, Tommy walked in. He didn't meet her eyes, just asked hesitantly, "Miss Clara, do you know how to sew?" She looked up, surprised. "A little." "Why?" Tommy rubbed his palms together. "My mum, she left a shirt for Papa. She only sewed half of it. I want to ask you to finish it." Clara froze for a beat. She remembered the sewing room upstairs, the strong lavender scent, the unfinished shirt waiting under the machine. "Are you sure? I don't want to do anything you or your dad aren't ready for." "I'm sure," Tommy said more firmly this time. "Papa keeps it exactly the same, but I think Mom would want it to be finished." The sewing room was quiet that night. Warm yellow light pulled over the pale blue men's shirt. A matching spool of thread lay beside it, the needle still stuck in the half-finished sleeve. Clara sat down, taking a slow breath, the lavender in the air wrapped around her like an embrace. Tommy stood beside her, watching as she threaded the needle. "My mom, she used to sing while she sewed," he murmured. "You are my sunshine." Clara smiled faintly, guiding the needle through the fabric. The sound of the needle piercing the cloth made a soft, steady rhythm. "Do you want to sing it?" she asked. He shook his head. "If I remember the words, I'll cry." She didn't push, just kept sewing, letting him stand beside her, occasionally leaning down to run his fingers along the new stitches, checking their straightness. The air felt still, caught between the scent of lavender and the quiet click of needle and thread, both sad and warm. "When it's finished," Tommy said softly, "I want to give it to Papa for his birthday, not to replace Mom, just so he knows we still remember." Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Tommy." When the last stitch of the evening was done, Clara folded the shirt neatly on the table. Tommy took one lavender sachet from Sam's memory box and set it on top. "So, it'll smell like Mom," he explained. Clara nodded with a smile. "Tomorrow we'll keep sewing, and when it's done, it won't just be a shirt, it'll be a story." Tommy murmured, and "Okay," and slipped out, his steps light so as not to make noise. Clara stayed for a few more minutes, gazing at the shirt under the warm desk lamp. The lavender still filled the room, but now it carried the warmth of two boys in the patience of her own hands. Downstairs, Sam's laughter rang out as James said something to him. Clara realized some things from the past aren't meant to be forgotten. They're meant to become part of what's being built next. And tonight in this sewing room, 3 people, a teacher, a boy, and a mother long gone, had started a new chapter in this family story. On the third morning after the blizzard, the sky looked like a sheet of grey paper. The wind had eased, but thick snow still clung to the wooden fence. In the garage, the drip irrigation model still ticked steadily, a quiet sound that made life at the Whitmore house feel slow and peaceful until the phone rang, sharp and insistent, shattering the calm. James was in the kitchen with Mrs. Ruth making breakfast when his phone began buzzing non-stop. He glanced at the screen, his brow tightening. The name read, Margaret Fairfax. "James, have you seen it yet?" Margaret's voice was brisk, skipping any greeting. "Webb's already put it out on 2 local finance blogs. Whitmore Agrach loses liquidity, forced to mortgage ranch land. Total garbage, but it's climbing the trending list." James straightened, setting the skillet down with a thud. "Ridiculous. We just closed the soil sensor deal with 2 major farms. There's no liquidity issue." "I know, but Webb doesn't need the truth. He needs noise," Margaret said quickly. "I need you in CEO mode now. Send me a cash flow summary, screenshots of the agri-credit accounts, and email confirmations from the new clients. I'll draft a short media rebuttal." James's voice was low and clipped. 30 minutes. "And one more thing," Margaret added, her voice dropping. "There's a rumor with a blurry photo. Someone got a shot of a woman on your porch. The captions along the lines of widowed CEO not alone during the blizzard." James's grip on the phone whitened his knuckles. "Clara?" "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "I know she's here helping the boys with lessons, but the press doesn't want facts. They want a story. The ranch, the blizzard, the widower, the stranger woman living together." Mrs. Ruth looked up from the table, her expression calm but worried. "Don't let them twist kindness into something ugly. I'll handle it," James said quickly to Margaret. "Call you back." He hung up, standing still for a beat. On the stairs, Clara had stopped mid-step. From her face, she'd heard enough to piece it together. "Sorry," she said softly. "I wasn't trying to listen." The ringtone was just loud. James turned toward her, his gaze softening. "We stirring trouble? He wants to buy the land for mining," I said. "No. So he's playing dirty. And I," Clara managed a wry smile, "have accidentally become the kindling. Mrs. Ruth stepped over, her hand warm on Clara's arm. "You're not kindling. You're part of what's keeping this house warm." Clara gave her a small, grateful nod. Still, something taut inside her had begun to vibrate. She glanced at Sam, busy coloring his snow map, and Tommy flipping through the way things work. They were so blissfully unaware. She didn't want that piece tarnished by a sensational headline. "I'll go get the boys down for breakfast, Mrs." Ruth said gently, as if to give James time to pull the documents Margaret needed. Clara understood, smiling faintly as she went to call them. Breakfast passed in a strangely normal way. Buttered pancakes, maple syrup, hot cocoa. Sam told a story about a squirrel running along the fence like a ninja. Tommy asked Claire about soil moisture gel. James was quieter than usual, occasionally leaving the table to answer emails. Sometimes the buzz of his phone in his pocket felt like a second heartbeat in the house. By mid-morning, the garage was back to being a classroom. Clara guided the boys through their work, Sam writing his day 3 of the Blizzard journal entry, Tommy wiring a simple circuit for an old moisture sensor. When Clara leaned down to help Sam correct a spelling mistake, footsteps sounded outside the door. James came in holding up his phone with Margaret on a video call. "Hi, boys." Margaret waved from the screen, her professional smile firmly in place. "I need a few minutes, James." Clara recognized her instantly, dark hair neatly tied back, sharp eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Hello, Margaret," Clara said quietly. Margaret nodded. "Clara, I hear about the garage classroom. Great idea. But here's the thing. Reporters don't care what the kids are learning. They care about who's sleeping where." The words were blunt, but her tone wasn't cruel, just the reality of her job. Clara drew a steady breath. "I understand," James cut in. "Clara's in the guest room. This is temporary, just to get through the storm. End of story." "End of story in your house," Margaret countered. "Not online. My advice, deliberate silence on personal matters, full transparency on company finances. I'll prep the press statement. James, you don't answer personal questions." "Clara." Her eyes met Clara's through the screen. "If anyone approaches you, say, 'I'm the temporary home learning coordinator during the blizzard.' Nothing more. No extra detail. Every extra word is ammo for them." Clara nodded. "I can do that. Thank you," Margaret said, pausing briefly. "And off the record, I'm sorry you got dragged into this. No one deserves to be turned into gossip for simply being kind." The comment warmed Clara's chest. She gave a small smile. "Thank you." When the call ended, James turned to her. "I'm sorry." "For what?" she asked. "For bringing the storm inside when you've been helping us keep it calm." Clara shook her head. "The storm's already out there. In here, we choose to keep the fire lit." His eyes softened slightly, but when he left the garage, his shoulders were still tense. Clara knew that for a man carrying both the ranch and the company, image wasn't a frivolous concern. At nap time, Clara stayed behind to tidy the classroom. While putting away pencils, she found a folded newspaper someone had slid under the door. The front page showed a headline from a local news site: "Whitmore Agruck in trouble. Widowed CEO not alone during blizzard." Beneath it was a grainy photo of the porch, clearly her, holding Sam the day she'd bandaged his knee. The tender gesture of a teacher was twisted into a suggestive caption. Clara's fingertips went cold. She set the paper down and stood there for a long moment, picturing the boys' faces if they heard grown-ups joking about a new mom. Her stomach clenched. No, she wouldn't let that happen. The garage door creaked open. "Mrs." Ruth came in holding a teapot. "How about some herbal tea?" Clara startled, hastily, hiding the paper behind her. Mrs. Ruth's eyes were kind but shrewd. "News out there is cold. It's warmer by the fire." Clara exhaled and handed her the paper. "I don't want to make trouble for anyone. I think when the roads open, I'll head back to town." "Mrs." Ruth poured the tea, the scent of mint and lavender curling into the air. You think leaving will make them quiet? At least it takes away the easy excuse, Clara said, pressing her lips together. I came here because of the storm. If I stay, people will say I stayed because of other things. Mrs. Ruth gave a sad little smile. People always need something to talk about. When Elizabeth first married James, they said she was a city girl who couldn't survive a Montana winter. When she passed, they said she should have rested more. People's tongues change direction faster than those clouds out there. Clara's eyes stung. But I can choose not to let that wind blow through the boys' lives. Any choice takes courage, Mrs. Ruth said, staying and holding your head high, or leaving to protect the peace. Both are brave. I just hope you choose what's right for your heart, not what makes the wrong people breathe easier. Clara stayed silent for a long moment. Finally, she nodded, though without making a promise. I'll write a short note for my old school, ask them to post a thank you, and make it clear I'm just coordinating lessons during the blizzard. Nothing more. Good, Mrs. Ruth said, resting a hand lightly on hers. And if you still choose to go when the road opens, I'll pack you a few lavender sachets so the scent of home stays with you. The words tightened Clara's chest. She smiled faintly, uncertain, but warm. Thank you. That evening, dinner was quieter than usual. James said little, answering briefly when Sam asked about the snow. Tommy seemed to notice and filled the silence by telling Papa how the irrigation model ran smoothly after they fixed the drill angle. James listened, nodding, his eyes a little warmer. There were battles outside he couldn't control yet, but inside the house, small things like the steady drip of water gave him the feeling of steering something right. After the boys went upstairs, Clara helped James with the dishes. Warm suds clung to the rim of the sink, and the soft clink of plates filled the space. Clara set down the dish towel, took a deep breath. James, she said, the road might open tomorrow. I think I'll head back to town. I don't want my being here to make things harder for you and the boys. James set down the plate in his hands with a quiet clink. He looked at her, his blue eyes free of anger, only tired with a trace of sadness. You're not the problem. The problem is a man who likes to burn things he doesn't own. Either way, Clara kept her tone gentle. This is your home. I don't want to be the spark. He was silent for a moment. If that's your choice, I'll respect it. But thank you for making this house less cold. His voice caught slightly on the last word. Clara nodded, unsure her voice would hold if she said more. She went into the living room, picking up the snowy day to read to Sam, her chest both light and heavy light, with the relief of having made a decision, heavy with the knowledge that it would leave a space not just for the boys, but for herself. That night, the wind rose again, slipping through the cracks in the door like paper-thin whispers. Somewhere out on the snow-covered road, clickbait headlines kept flashing. But inside, the fire still burned. The lavender scent still lingered. Clara read slower than usual, each word like a fine stitch closing up a day torn open by rumor, stitched carefully so that if she left tomorrow, the seam would still hold. That morning, winter sunlight crept chilly through the window, as if checking whether the Whitmore house was awake. After days of blizzard whiteouts, the Montana sky stretched wide in a deep, endless blue, thin, sheep-like clouds drifting lazily across it. The main road into town had been cleared by the snowplow. Clara stood at the living room window, staring at the road's two black asphalt strips cutting through the white. Her feelings were a jumble relief, but also a faint hollowess. The night before she had packed a few things into her old backpack, a couple of changes of clothes, her teaching materials, and the lavender sachet Mrs. Ruth had quietly left on her table. This stay had always been meant as temporary shelter, but it had given her more than she'd expected. Footsteps rattled softly on the stairs. Sam and Tommy came down, both with their hands hidden behind their backs, their eyes bright with a secret. "Miss Clara," Sam called, stretching out her name like he was afraid she'd vanish any second. "We've got something for you." They held out a folded sheet of white, a 4-paper covered in colored pencil writing and drawings. In the middle, in proudly crooked letters, it read, "Hand contract. Miss Clara stays with us until the end of the school term." Underneath were 2 signatures in blue and red, complete with fingerprint hearts, and in the corner, a drawing of 3 people standing in front of a house while snow fell around them. Clara laughed, but her eyes stung. "When did you come up with this?" "Last night," Tommy said, more serious than his little brother. "We decided if you leave, who's going to teach Sam snow math?" Who's going to help me build the sensor circuit? And who's going to read stories before bed? Sam chimed in. Papa doesn't do voices. Clara crouched to their level, taking the paper, her hands a little shaky. You know, I was planning to leave so I wouldn't cause trouble for your papa. But you don't cause trouble, Sam said, shaking his head hard. You make our house happier. The simple statement landed like a small arrow in the place she'd been trying to keep steady. Before she could respond, a low chuckle sounded from the doorway. James was standing there, hands in his pockets, mouth tilted in an unsure half-smile. Looks like you two just drafted an employment contract. Not employment, Tommy corrected seriously. A stay contract. James stepped closer, standing opposite Clara. In the morning light, his eyes were a deep, steady blue, no longer clouded with the strain of the past few days. The storm's over. The road's open. You can go back to town any time. But if you want to stay until the end of the term, I have a proposal. Clara tightened her hold on the paper. Sounds like a negotiation. Something like that, James said, taking a slow breath like he was walking into a high-stakes meeting. Terms are as follows. Clear work schedule. You remain the home learning coordinator for both boys. I'll pay monthly plus room and board. You'll have a proper room upstairs, not the sofa, and we respect each other's privacy completely. Clara tilted her head. Do I get the right to refuse interviews? Not just the right, James said. I'll make sure no reporter gets near you. I'll handle that. Mrs. Ruth emerged from the kitchen with a tray of tea, smiling wryly. Sounds like you're hiring a new department head, but for the family company. The moment lightened, and Clara laughed. All right, I agree, but on one added condition. If Sam and Tommy finish early, I get to take them outside in the snow for experiments or play. Deal, James said, a hint of relief in his voice. Sam squealed and threw his arms around her. So, you're staying? Clara ruffled his hair. Yes, I'm staying. This contract is officially in effect. Tommy smiled. A rare, genuine one. Then I'll go print another copy for Papa to sign. James cleared his throat. I'll sign it myself. No need to make as many copies as a corporate merger. That afternoon, Clara moved her things from the sofa to an empty room upstairs. The small space had a window facing the white pasture and wooden fence. On the bedside table sat a jar of dried lavender, Mrs. Ruth's quiet touch. Setting down her backpack, Clara felt she'd taken another step deeper into the Whitmore family's world. That night's dinner featured potato stew, crusty bread, and an apple pie Sam insisted was their contract celebration. Mrs. Ruth poured wine for James and Clara, warm milk for the boys. Mid-meal, Sam leaned toward Tommy, whispering just loud enough for Clara to hear. See? Our hand contract worked. Clara feigned a stern look. I heard that. Next time remember to negotiate for weekly desserts. The whole table laughed, even James, a short but genuine laugh. In that moment, Clara knew she'd made the right choice, to stay openly and clearly, not as a temporary guest, but as part of the rhythm of life in this place. That night, Montana lay wrapped in silence, broken only by the soft sweep of wind over the roof and the faint crackle of wood in the fireplace. Clara was tidying up the books in the garage classroom when James's hurried footsteps sounded at the back door. Clara, he said, his voice low but urgent, the water pump system for the barn's frozen. If we don't fix it now, we'll have no water for the cattle by morning. She set the books aside, quickly, pulling on a thick coat and wool gloves. I'm coming with you. James hesitated for a moment as if ready to argue, then simply nodded. All right, but stay careful. Outside, a fresh layer of snow lay smooth and glistening under the moonlight. Their breaths rose in pale clouds in the biting cold. The yellow beam of James's flashlight swept along the path to the barn, skimming the snow-packed fences. When they reached it, the wind hissed through the cracks, mingling with the restless sounds of the cattle inside. James crouched to check the pipes, the leather of his gloves dusted with snow. The water's frozen solid here. We'll need the portable heater to thaw it. Clara knelt beside him, taking the heater from his hands. The warm glow spilled over both their faces as they leaned close to inspect the frozen section, so close their shoulders touched, their breaths mingling in the frigid air. She could see the damp strands of hair at his temple, feel the steady heat radiating through his heavy coat. For a moment, everything else faded. The wind, the barn, even the cold, leaving only the sound of her own heartbeat. James looked up, his gaze catching her steady, deep, and unguarded. The space between them shrank to a few breaths. Clara felt his hand rest almost unconsciously over hers, where she held the heater. Neither of them moved, caught in that quiet pull drawing them closer. Just a few inches more. "Papa, Miss Clara." The small high voice rang out from the yard, shattering the fragile stillness. Sam stood at the barn door in striped pajamas, clutching his teddy bear, his face scrunched against the cold. James stepped back, pulling his hand away. "Sam, what are you doing out here? It's freezing." "I was thirsty," Sam mumbled. "I went to the kitchen, but you weren't there." Clara smiled gently, taking his hand. "Come on, I'll walk you back in. Papa will be done soon." Back at the house, James secured the barn door and followed them in at a slower pace. In the kitchen, Clara poured Sam a warm cup of milk and set a few cookies on a plate. He sipped and yawned wide. "Finish up and then back to bed," James said, his voice softer than usual. Sam nodded, and within minutes was asleep at the table. Clara scooped him up, carrying him through the living room. James walked close behind, as if making sure she wouldn't slip on the polished wood floor. After tucking Sam in and switching off the light, they lingered in the dark hallway, the hush broken only by the faint wind outside. James spoke first. "Clara, back at the barn." He paused, his eyes flicking toward Sam's room. "I don't want to rush. Kids need to feel safe above everything else." She nodded, a mix of wistfulness and quiet relief stirring in her chest. "I understand and I agree. If there's something between us, we'll let it grow slowly. My priority is Sam and Tommy too." A trace of warmth passed through his eyes. "Thank you." Clara smiled, then turned toward the stairs. James stayed where he was, the glow from the hallway lamp painting his face with a mix of resolve and something that felt almost expectant. Down in the kitchen, the fireplace still glowed red. Clara sank onto the sofa, pulling a blanket over her shoulders. Outside, the snow wind still whispered, but inside her, a quiet promise had taken root. A promise that no matter what came next, they would move slowly to protect what mattered most: this family. That morning, Montana's sky was crystal clear after a fresh night's snowfall. Clara had just opened the porch door to take in the cold, clean air when Sam came bounding out, teddy bear in hand, grinning from ear to ear. "Careful, it's icy," she warned, bending down to scoop him into her arms and carry him back inside. The moment the door closed, a rapid series of click, click, click sounds snapped from somewhere beyond the distant fence. Clara turned sharply. Several figures in dark coats stood there, long-lensed cameras aimed directly at the porch. One of them fired the shutter in quick bursts, the flash stinging her eyes. "Clara," Mrs. Ruth's voice called from the kitchen. "It's fine," Clara answered quickly, pulling the curtain closed. But her heart was thudding harder than it should. By noon, the incident had exploded. Clara's phone buzzed non-stop texts from old colleagues, college friends, even parents from her former school. "Are you living with Widow Wero CEO James Whitmore? The internet says you're his new girlfriend." Curious and uneasy, Clara clicked on one link. There it was, a photo of her holding Sam, the Whitmore porch behind them, under a bold headline, "Replacing the Family. CEO James Whitmore spotted with mystery woman and 2 sons." Below hundreds of comments, some were curious, others downright cruel. That was fast. Poor late wife. Clara set the phone down, bitterness pooling in her chest. She didn't want Sam or Tommy to ever see those words. More than that, she hated the thought of being cast as someone taking Elizabeth's place. That night, after the boys were asleep, Clara sat alone at the dining table, a blank sheet of paper in front of her. She wasn't a PR expert, but as a teacher, she believed in the power of clear, kind words. "Mrs." Ruth emerged from the kitchen, holding a fabric-bound notebook worn at the edges. "You should read this." Clara looked at the cover. It was Elizabeth's journal. "Are you sure?" Elizabeth was direct. "Mrs." Ruth said, "She once told me that if James ever met someone good for the boys, she wanted that person to know the truth about her. There's a letter at the end." Clara turned to the last page. The handwriting was soft, slanting, slightly right, carrying the faint scent of lavender from the paper. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I know James. He'll keep everything the same to hold on to me. But love isn't in the things. It's in the heart. Don't replace me. Be yourself. And if you love the boys, they will feel it. That's enough." Clara sat still for a long time, her vision blurring. She realized the weight she'd been carrying. The fear of being compared, of being doubted, didn't come from James or the children, but from her own belief that she was trespassing on sacred space. The letter unlocked something inside her. Mrs. Ruth's hand rested gently on her shoulder, her gaze warm. "You don't need to prove anything except being yourself." That night, Clara wrote an open letter, posting it on the old village school's website, where she knew the local community would see it. "This week, several images of me with 2 young students were circulated alongside false assumptions. I want to make it clear, I am not here to replace anyone, nor to claim a place that was never mine. I believe in the right to remember those we've lost, and the right to keep living. The Whitmore family has lost a remarkable wife and mother. What I do each day here is simply to support the boys' learning, cook a few meals, and share a little laughter. I will honor the memory of the one who is gone, and I will honor every moment we have now. To anyone who has faced loss, allow yourself to keep your memories, and also open the door to good things still to come. Both can exist together, and neither is a betrayal of the other." She read it one last time, then clicked post. The next morning, James came into the kitchen holding a folded newspaper. "Clara, what you wrote, it's better than anything my PR team could have drafted." Clara gave a modest smile. "I just said what needed to be said." James folded the paper again, his eyes softening. Elizabeth would have agreed. The sentence was short, but enough to lift a quiet weight from Clara's heart. A Montana winter night was usually silent. The pale moonlight draped across snow-covered slopes, but that evening, a different glow tore through the darkness. Clara was clearing dishes in the kitchen when she noticed a flicker of red through the window. At first, she thought it was headlights, but then the wind carried a sharp, acrid smell. Something was wrong. "Clara, out there." "It's on fire," Tommy blurted, pale-faced as he rushed in. Clara hurried to the porch. On the north hill, right at the edge of Whitmore Ranch property, a massive haystack was engulfed in flames. The fire whipped by wind, scattering burning cinders into the sky. The blaze lit the snow in eerie crimson. She quickly lowered her voice. "Tommy, Sam, listen to me. We're going down to the storage cellar under the garage. It's the safest place." The boys followed her into the reinforced space with his concrete walls, fire extinguishers, and emergency lamps. Clara handed each of them a thick coat and a water bottle. "I'm going to call the fire department and the sheriff. You two stay here. No going outside. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Tommy said, pulling Sam into his arms. Clara dashed back upstairs and dialed Sheriff Cole. "There's a fire on the North Hill near James Whitmore's fence line. The wind's strong. It could spread to the barns. I think it's deliberate." Cole didn't miss a beat. "We're on our way. Direct the firefighters through the west gate near the main water tank. Can you do that?" "I'll be there." Clara shrugged back into her coat, tugged her wool hat low, and ran out into the cold. The wind cut her face like glass, snow squeaking beneath her boots. She crossed the yard, reached the west gate, and planted her flashlight into the ground as a beacon. Minutes later, sirens wailed and green-red lights strobed across the night. "This way," she shouted, waving them through. Once the trucks rolled in, she quickly pointed out the water tank in the safest path up the hill. One firefighter looked back at her. "Thanks." Quick thinking. Meanwhile, James galloped in from the barns, his coat crusted with ice. He swung down from the saddle, eyes scanning. "Clara, where are the kids?" "Safe in the cellar," she called, breath still ragged from the run. For a moment, something in his expression softened, relief breaking through, but there was no time to pause. He joined the firefighters, hauling hoses and spraying water at the raging blaze. It took nearly 30 minutes to bring the fire under control, until only smoke hissed from the blackened pile. A few deputies combed the site for signs of arson. Sheriff Cole met James and Clara with a grim shake of the head. No question this was said on purpose. "I'll be looking into Webb." When the danger had passed, James found Claire in the yard, her cheeks flushed red from the cold, damp hair clinging to her temple. She was checking the backup water barrels, asking firefighters if they needed more supplies. James stepped closer, laying a hand gently on her shoulder. "Tonight, if it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened." Clara looked up, a little flustered. "I just did what needed to be done." "No," he said, shaking his head, eyes steady on hers. "You're the one who kept the boys safe and kept me from losing my head. Clara, you are the calm heart of this family." The words tightened something in her chest. She knew James didn't use the word family lightly, not when talking about anyone outside Tommy and Sam. His gaze wasn't guarded. Now it was warm and deep, as if there was more he wanted to say, but wasn't ready yet. All she could manage was a quiet thank you. The cold wind still moved around them, but they stayed there for a long moment, letting the night's last flame, not the one on the hill, but the quiet ember between them, burn in its own unhurried way. The next morning, Bozeman lay under a thin sheet of ice. James pulled on a heavy coat, carrying his notebook and a USB drive. "I'm heading to the North Hill to review the scene," he told Clara. The ashes were still smoldering. In a charred corner of the fence, James spotted a piece of melted nylon and the lingering smell of gasoline. In the snow, large boot prints with long strides led straight toward the trail. Sheriff Cole and the investigator quickly took note. "Do you have any cameras out here?" James nodded, retrieving memory cards from 2 trail cameras. Back at the sheriff's office, they reviewed the footage. The screen froze on the 1012p.m frame. A hooded man carrying a plastic can, his gait familiar. A second camera caught the tail lights of a grey pickup, turning around at the trailhead. "Webb drives a grey 2500 HD dented rear bumper," James said. They went to Hank's auto. Hank confirmed that the night before Webb had stopped by for an oil change, and the shop's camera showed his truck heading toward Whitmore Ranch at around 10 p.m. Next, from a nearby gas station, Webb's company debit card receipt showed he had purchased 2 5-gallon cans of gas the afternoon of the fire. "That's enough to get a warrant," Sheriff Cole said. That evening, police raided Webb's house with a search warrant. In the garage, they found 2 plastic cans still smelling of gas, a pair of size 11 fish-scale tread boots, and a piece of charred straw caught in the tire. Webb's phone data matched the time and location at the trail by the ranch. The sheriff read him his rights and placed him under arrest for arson. Webb's face drained of color as the investigator held up the camera, still his silhouette and the gas can against the snowy night. As the police car carried Webb away, James stood on the porch. Clara stepped out, holding a warm ceramic mug. "All done. Just the first step. The prosecutor will file charges soon. And thank you. If you hadn't saved the kids and led the firefighters in, things could have been much worse." Clara smiled. "If you hadn't remembered the cameras and kept your cool, we wouldn't have had proof." From inside the house, Tommy and Sam peeked out, eyes wide. "Dad, Miss Clara, is there going to be another fire?" "No," James assured them, pulling them both into his arms. He glanced at Clara. "Tonight will be quiet. Someone's keeping watch." Clara bent down to their level. "Tomorrow, how about we make a courage box?" Tommy nodded eagerly. "I'll put in my whistle." Sam hugged Clara's neck tightly. "I'll put in the beanie you gave me." James watched them, feeling the warmth in the house overpower the cold outside. The firestorm had passed, but one thing still burned: trust and connection, stronger than the snow blanketing the hills. Whitmore Ranch lay in deep quiet. Snow blanketed the rooftops, and the moonlight spread across the white ice with a metallic shimmer. In the sewing room, still carrying a faint scent of lavender, Clara sat at the table, a small yellow lamp casting a warm halo of light. Before her lay Elizabeth's unfinished shirt, pale blue cotton, each stitch evenly spaced, only a few final seams left on the cuffs. Clara's fingers brushed gently over the fabric, as if touching a fragment of the family's memory. Tommy had waited so long to wear the shirt his mother had once begun sewing for him. Clara knew his upcoming birthday was the one chance to make it real. The wind hissed outside the porch, but inside there was only the soft crackle of the stove and the quiet sound of needle and thread sliding through cloth. When the last stitch was tied off, Clara drew a deep breath. She folded the shirt neatly, placed it in a gift box along with a small card. "Tommy, your mother began this shirt with love. I am simply the one who helped finish it. May you always feel that love." The door opened quietly. James stepped in, carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa. He wore a thick charcoal sweater, his hair slightly tasseled from the wind, and his eyes softer than Clara had ever seen them. "I thought you could use a break," he said, setting one mug on the table before her. "You've been working all day." Clara smiled, accepting the cocoa and letting the warmth spread to her fingertips. "I just finished the shirt for Tommy." James looked down, his fingers brushing lightly over the edge of the fabric. "You kept Elizabeth stitching." "Because it's part of the story," Clara replied, her voice low but steady. "The rest is for me to write." A long silence followed, broken only by the wind sweeping against the window. James stood there as if weighing something. Then he exhaled, slowly, and stepped closer. "Clara," his voice was low and deep, "I don't want this to just be a work arrangement anymore." Clara's heart skipped. She looked up, searching for the truth in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want you to stay. Not because the kids need you, but because I need you. I love you." Clara let out a shaky laugh, part relief, part fear. "James, I'm afraid I'll never be enough to fill the empty space." He cut her off, moving closer and taking her hand. "No one can replace Elizabeth. You don't need to fill that space. You just need to be yourself. And for me, that's enough." His gaze was as deep as the Montana night, and this time, Clara didn't look away. In that moment, he leaned down. Their kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't burning. It was slow, soft like snow melting on the lips, warm like a hearth in winter. Clara felt his hand gently tighten around hers, like a silent promise not to let go. When they pulled back, their breath still mingled in the small space between them. Clara whispered, "So, we'll call this a new agreement." James smiled, a rare expression breaking through his usual reserve. No clauses, no expiration date, just forever. That night, Clara left the finished shirt on the table by the window where the moonlight could reach it. She knew that in the morning when Tommy opened the gift box, he would see not just a shirt, but proof that love could be carried forward, never lost, only passed from one person to another, gently yet steadfastly. And she at last allowed herself to believe in a home. Spring in Montana comes slowly, but when it does, it bursts forth, as if making up for all the long frozen months. On the Whitmore Ranch pastures, bright green shoots crowded upward beneath the wide open sky. Lavender buds began to unfurl, their gentle fragrance drifting in the breeze, mingling with the laughter and voices of those gathered there. In an open space decorated with white ribbons and long wooden tables, a small engagement celebration was taking place. Not lavish, not noisy, just family and true friends. Margaret Fairfax, usually so composed it seemed she was always preparing for a press conference, was beaming behind her camera today, snapping shot after shot to capture every moment. Sheriff Cole, wearing a striped apron, stood by the BBQ grill, expertly turning skewers as the savory scent filled the air. Mrs. Ruth, dressed in a deep green dress, held a bundle of papers in her hand. When the chatter quieted, she began to read aloud. "Some storms come to test us, and some people arrive to show us that storms will always pass." Clara stood beside James, their fingers intertwined. His eyes were warm like April sunlight, so different from the cold, guarded man she had first met during that snowstorm. On her left hand, a simple ring with a small diamond glimmered in the light. Not flashy, but fitting, just like their love. Sam and Tommy, both in crisp white shirts, darted around the tables, sometimes helping Sheriff Cole carry bread, sometimes running back toward Clara. At one point, Sam tugged gently on her sleeve and whispered, "I think Mom would have liked you." Clara's heart tightened, but in the best way. She nodded, bent down to hug him, and murmured, "I think so too, Sam." The gathering was easy and joyful. Laughter mixed with the wind, the smell of grilled meat blended with the scent of lavender. No one mentioned Webb, the rumors, or the hard days behind them. Today was only about the present and the future that lay ahead. After the meal, Tommy and Sam pulled Clara toward a small table by the wooden fence. On it sat the memory box. This time, alongside lavender sachets, the old teddy bear and a scrap of unfinished fabric, there was a new photo, the whole family standing in the pasture. James's arm draped around Clara's shoulders, Sam and Tommy hugging her from either side. Clara touched the frame lightly. She wasn't replacing Elizabeth, nor was she trying to, but she understood now that she was a new part of this family story. A fresh lavender plant rooted in a garden that had weathered storms, still blooming strong. As the sunset painted the horizon in shades of violet, James led Clara to a quiet corner of the field where the breeze carried an even stronger scent of lavender. Wrapping his arms around her from behind, he whispered, "I once thought the storm had taken everything, but it turns out it only brought you to me." Clara rested her head against his chest, eyes following the last rays of sunlight slipping off the fields. In that moment, she knew the storm had stopped.